Hello, Politics Plus Media 101 listeners. Mr. John Gunnison and myself are back after a little bit of a layoff. We have a very, very special show lined up for today with Dmitri Mehlhorn, founder of Investing in Us. Dmitri was not particularly political or partisan before the 2016 election. Then Mr. Former President Trump came into office and those things changed. Dmitri got involved. And now, like we said, he's involved with Investing in Us. So Dmitri, before we start, I just want to say thank you for joining us on this beautiful Sunday here in DC, Virginia area.
Thank you for having me. I've very much enjoyed listening to your podcast. It's labeled 101, but if so, it's a survey course that is remarkably accurate and useful.
Well, thank you very much for that endorsement. And Dmitri, we've been following your work. As we mentioned, you're the founder of Investing in Us, and we want to get into what that is. As John and I were doing research on your organization, we noticed that you invested in Run for Something, which for those that aren't initiated to that group, it's a group focused basically on candidate recruitment for Democrats, progressives at the state, local. And we've actually hosted Amanda Littman twice. So we think that's a great investment and was hoping that you could explain what you're doing with Invest in Us and along with beating Trump, what are the tactics you are looking to engage to accomplish that goal?
Great. So Investing in Us is something that I co-founded with one of my college schoolmates named Reid Hoffman, who also was a venture capitalist, but like 1,000 times more successful than I was financially. And so we both agreed after the 2016 election that we could not let Trump get a second term. That would be catastrophic. And we didn't know what we could do. And so we looked at the political ecosystem and concluded that our role was to play the risk capital, growth capital, venture capital role. We sometimes styled ourselves as risk capital for the resistance. We believe that politics and political campaigns tend not to innovate very quickly. You know, an outsider will win an election, like Karl Rove will win in 2000, or Barack Obama in 2008, or Bill Clinton, or whatever. You just go back as far as you want. An outsider will win because they have a bunch of new and exciting tactics, and then they will be in office for 8 years, and the other party will have done all the innovating and they won't have changed. And that was the reality that we faced in 2016. And so the way that we set about our work was to try to invest in enough new ideas and then help them scale in time for the democratic ecosystem to innovate rather than in 8 years, innovate sufficiently in 4 to keep Trump out.
So Dmitri, you're in a position where you're helping to support, endorse candidates in House races across the country. And I'm interested in learning about how you identify a candidate that's really worthy of your support, that's someone that you're excited about. Of course, every district is going to be different, but let's just take a hypothetical district. Let's say that we've got a district, say in Western Pennsylvania, it's got a Cook PVI score of Republican +2. And we've got a whole set of primary candidates who are competing to try to represent the Democratic Party in this race. What would you want to see in a candidate in a race like that? What kind of characteristics are you looking for?
That's a great question, John. Just to be clear, that answer has changed over time. It was different in 2017, 2018, 2020, and now, partially because we've learned things and partially because the environment has changed. Right now, it would need to be an extraordinary candidate for me to weigh in at all, because mostly my job is the presidential. And so it has to be, now, because Pennsylvania is a swing state, that matters to me, but it still has to be exceptional. In this particular case, what I would like to do is kick the ball over to someone I trust who's better at doing diligence than I am. Someone like a Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. I would ask him for his opinion if he was willing to give it. I would ask the House Majority PAC for their opinion if they were willing to give it. Often those people may not give it officially, but you can sort of talk to them personally and privately and get a sense of things. But in general, the qualities that you look for are, most importantly, is you need someone who is dynamic and charismatic and hardworking and just a good athlete at politics, because that matters. You want someone who's good at engaging with people, because if you're a candidate and you meet a person that has an impact that nothing else can have. And if you're a candidate out in the field meeting a lot of people and say you're a Democrat in a place where the word is used to connote something scary, you can maybe not only engage that person, but they then speak up the next time someone in their friend network is bashing Democrats, et cetera, et cetera. So we want someone who's good and dynamic and willing to work hard. If you have all of those things, what you really want is a centrist. Because if you have all the charisma and dynamism, you will do well. But if you're in the center, you will do a better job in each of the three areas that matter for winning an election. You'll do a better job of turning people out. More base mobilization happens with centrist candidates. You will do a better job of persuading swing voters because you're not scary. And you will do a better job of reducing the other side's turnout, again, because you're not scary. So that's the sort of set of things that you would want.
Now, on immigration, in the poll, that was an area of weakness for you. You have been widely criticized, Donald, as you know, for offending immigrants in your announcement speech. I want to just play again exactly what you said in that speech. Here you are.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Now, you've tried to clarify this statement in recent days, Donald, but I guess the question comes down to this. Do you regret saying that specifically about rapists, or do you stand by it?
No, not at all. Of course, it's not only Mexico. If you let that run a little bit longer, it talks about people coming from all over. They're coming from all over. They'll soon be coming, and probably already have, be coming from all over the world.
So, Dmitri, you spoke about how you got involved in politics really because of Trump during the Trump era. And I think that was an experience that a lot of people had. It really felt like a break from what was ordinary in American politics, not necessarily in the grand view of history, but at least in the previous era of American politics, where we'd gotten used to a certain kind of comedy, a certain set of rules that candidates really abided by generally, especially at the national level. And it's interesting how many people kind of got involved in politics in this era. And I wanted to hear from you about whether you thought there were key differences between the old guard of the Democratic Party and people like yourself who kind of got involved at this key moment that was really sort of a before and after moment for American politics.
Well, the most important difference is literally tactical. So the people who had been really, really involved in politics prior to 2016, a lot of talent, a lot of money, a lot of energy, and a lot of conformity of ideas. And suddenly you have Donald Trump and you have a bunch of new people coming in and they're new. And it is the mere fact that they're new that adds a lot of energy and innovation. For example, right now, some of the groups that are raising money to help protect American democracy in political philanthropy are groups like Galvanize, which is organizing white women, and Push Black, which is an online community of Black people, and Future Forward USA, which is a 527 super PAC that is, frankly, the favored super PAC with the campaign. None of those organizations even existed in 2016. The people who are the CEOs of those efforts were not really in politics particularly. And so it's just a marrying of new energy as people who had been, well, they're all kind of the same, to suddenly a whole lot of people are like, oh, this is different. I need to get involved.
So when you're looking at groups that you want to invest in, and I'm going to editorialize a bit here, feel free to push back or not even address my hypothetical here, but your due diligence, how do you go about that? And specifically, a pet peeve of mine, a bugaboo is, and we will get into this later, I think that there are a lot of things Democrats can learn but have not learned from Republican messaging. And I also think that there are a lot of groups that sell themselves as former Republicans that are going to message to Democrats or message on behalf of Democrats, let me rephrase that, to help win an election. And then what I see is your old guard kind of super PAC Democrat or super PAC establishment approach, which is the Lincoln Project. They raised $90 million. They did a lot of grassroots fundraising, which was novel for a super PAC independent expenditure to raise money. But 50 million of that money went through their own consulting firms. And it felt like to me, as somebody who's messaged to swing voters and Republican voters, that their ads were wrapped up in, we are using Republican tactics to reach Republican voters, but their ads were really focused on reaching wealthy Democrats that their message resonated with so that they could continue their business and kind of continue that scheme. So I would say that the Lincoln Project is an example of what not to do. But when you're looking at what groups to invest in, how do you wade through transparency in independent expenditures when, inherently they're not transparent, so you don't know how your money's being used?
So first of all, I am going to defend the Lincoln Project somewhat. I'm not going to say that any of the specific criticisms that you levied are false in any objective sense. I'm just going to point out that lots of different people have lots of different roles, and some of those roles involve making obscene amounts of money. There are a lot of campaign consultants and lawyers and so forth who just make a lot of business from the business of politics. And maybe that's appalling, maybe it's not. That's not my problem to fix. I am trying to use the system as it exists. And specifically with regard to the Lincoln Project, there were some things that I thought that they did very well, and there are some things that I thought they did not do well. I agree with you completely that their television ads did not have any persuasive effect on any voters. Not one voter changed their vote because of those ads. However, at least not directly. However, indirectly, it's possible that they had a lot of benefit and therefore changed a lot of voters' minds in a couple of ways. One, they got inside Trump's head. They just did. We have a lot of reporting that he and his campaign team were just constantly obsessing about the ads that they ran. And if you can do that, great. And if you can do it in a way that gets people fired up about how much they hate Trump and his Republicans, fine. And if you make, tens of millions of dollars for your own consulting firm in a multi-billion-dollar race, look, I don't love it, but whatever. Now, but you asked a broader question, which is how do you recruit people? How do you think about people? And, you touched on a couple different things. One is you do want to zig when others zag in general. Like there's a presumptive bias that if someone is doing something in a new way, that it's a good thing. The second thing you want to do is you want to give people an opportunity to demonstrate themselves over time. So if you genuinely are an entrepreneur and a founder, and if you can easily look online for some of the Stanford Business School lectures that my co-founder Reid Hoffman has given in trying to find founders for your venture purposes. There are certain things you want to look for, but someone who's entrepreneurial, willing to state a bold hypothesis, willing to say that if you give them money, they'll prove it true, willing to say that it's not true if it's not. I got the money and it didn't work, turns out. Or I failed and I learned something. Over time, I will give a couple of individual endorsements in the Never Trump space. First of all, I have worked with the Lincoln Project. I do think that people in particular, Rick Wilson has a gifted turn of phrase, and working with Joe Trippi, I do think, again, like no direct votes moving, but like as disruptors to the other side, great. I would not move a lot of money to them, but the fact that they raise it on their own from other people doesn't bother me. Because here's the other thing, Justin. Grassroots money is going to flow to things that are not going to win. Like Jamie Harrison was not going to win. Amy McGrath was not going to win. Grassroots money is going to grassroots money. So you can't let yourself get too bothered. In terms of the money that we're trying to move, the Never Trump movement has a couple of rock star players. I think Sarah Longwell is one of the most talented political professionals in the world. And she stands out as a Never Trump Republican. I also think that Lucy Caldwell, who ran Joe Walsh's kind of abortive campaign and has quarterbacked a lot of stuff, she's really talented too and very smart. So, and again, you find them through references, through networks. You find people in places you hadn't been expecting to look. You look for insane value propositions that they're willing to put themselves behind. And you test those value propositions against the things we've learned about politics, which is, now 8 years of venture investing.
It's a fascinating perspective to hear a venture capitalist discuss political donations, because I do think that is novel. I'd slightly push back and say that, Dmitri, anybody could have gotten under Trump's skin, and it was just the Lincoln Project that was there doing it. But everything you said, I think I agree with.
So because we're talking about the never Trump policy, and the diversity there is within the Never Trump cohort. Dmitri, you were identifying some people that you saw as particularly talented inside that group, and there are others that are maybe not so talented. And something that I think is kind of an interesting divergence within the Never Trump camp is the way that they talk about the Democrats. I think that some of the people inside the Never Trump cohort, maybe some of the ones that Justin was referring to with the Lincoln Project, had a certain sales tactic where they would say, the reason that you need us is because we're the only ones who know how to do this. And the Democrats are all pathetic. And what you need is to bring in Republicans who can come in and use those brilliant Republican tactics and win races. And then there's a different cohort of Never Trumpers. And I think Longwell is kind of in this camp. I think a lot of the people at the Bulwark are kind of in this camp, Tim Miller and others. And what they say is, I don't really get this mentality because when we were on the Republican side, we actually kept losing to Democrats. And we really looked at them as strong campaigners in a lot of ways. A lot of these figures, a formative moment for them was the 2012 cycle when they really got their behinds handed to them. And they remember that and they say, Democrats actually are pretty tough and do a lot of things well. And if we can assist that, effort by bringing our talents, it will become an even stronger camp. But we're not here just to tell you that we're the only ones worth supporting and the only ones who know how to do this. And it kind of brings to mind a question that we wanted to ask you, Dmitri, which is, with all of this kind of hand-wringing on the Democratic side, the self-loathing about how campaigns are run, what are some of the things that you think Democrats are actually doing really well and deserve to be complimented for in the way that they run campaigns?
Few things. First of all, both can be true. It can be true that Democrats have a lot to learn from Republicans, and Democrats have a lot to teach Republicans, right? There's a lot of complicated stuff here. I think that the Republicans who came in and said, hire us because we're Republicans and we know how to rip your face off, are basically making the same argument as your former guest, Rachel Bidecoffer, which is that Democrats do not fight hard enough. And let's just put a footnote in that to just say, fighting hard on the Democratic side sometimes means fighting stupid, right? Sometimes we fight hard in ways that make us look idiotic and help the bad guys win swing voters. So fighting hard has to mean fighting smart. Now, getting back to Democratic tactics that are really good, if you think about it, like the movement that Donald Trump represents and the Republican movement around it is historically a very, very powerful movement. You are appealing to fear and hatred and tribalism and misogyny, and that has governed our species since before we evolved. And Trump in particular is doing so during one of those global moments, happens, I guess, every century or just under, where suddenly rural people are real mad at urban people and real mad that urban people are not as sufficiently committed to their views of gender and religion and everything else, and are not sufficiently respectful of the contributions that laborers make and whatever. So we're in this global spasm, and Trump has various forms of backing from criminals all over the world, from Bibi Netanyahu to Vladimir Putin, from Erdogan to, in different ways, MBS. And domestically, he has access to the entire empire of hate that Rupert Murdoch built with Fox News. And he has access to the entire white Christian nationalist movement, which has now anointed him. And so if you look at that, Democrats are currently tied and control the Senate and are very close to the House. So why is that? Well, there's a few things. First of all, the Democratic Party is the party of the rule of law and the center right now. It's not a close call. And so people like Abby Spanberger, who are deciding to enter politics, are doing so as Democrats. New people who are coming into the electorate as rising stars are doing so as Democrats, because Democrats represent truth, justice, and the American way, as it's been historically understood. That's one thing. A second thing is that Democrats live in the fact-based reality, right? That has strengths and weaknesses, right? So on the one hand, we can't lie the way the other side can. On the other hand, like, we don't have to constantly keep telling our story, right? Like, the other side is, well, Joe Biden needs to be impeached because we have this evidence about Hunter Biden, some of which came from a Chinese asset and some of which came from a Russian spy. And we have nothing other than that, but we still keep going because we have no relationship with truth or with fact checking. because the Democrats are a party of the rule of law, you're not having Democratic state parties going bankrupt due to corruption and internecine fighting, right? Like the things that are tough about the Trump movement, it's violence, it's rage, it's irrationality. Those are all dangerous. But like the inverse of them, the creativity, the trust, the capability, the Democrats represent far more money. Joe Biden overwhelmingly, I think the counties that Biden won produce 70% of the nation's output. We control all of the net mass media and culture. That's why the right is so angry, is because, they want the government to ban that shit. So broadly speaking, the Democrats have a lot of assets.
There were legitimate criticisms coming from myself at the time, Republicans, about how, Democrats are winning the culture war and there's structural benefits to Democrats. Maybe in response to that, Republicans kind of created their own ecosystem, podcasts. The hate that you just described was transported into new media, essentially. And it's really siloed off in some sense the way that we receive our information, who we listen to. So in that vein, kind of expanding on your last answer and understanding that we're in this unique context, if we're just focusing on political advertising, what would be a major blind spot from your perspective? This could be narrative. It could be delivery tactics, right? You can take this in any way that you want, but if you could pinpoint one or two specific weak spots that Democrats need to get better at, what would they be from your perspective?
So I'd like to give three answers. First, I want to credit the conservative intellectuals who built the contrarian conservative intellectual ecosystem, because I still do believe that many of them did it because they wanted truth. They wanted small c conservative principles that are now embodied entirely within the Democratic Party. And so when someone like a Charlie Sykes or a Jeff Flake or a William F. Buckley was trying to create these alternative media ecosystems, I genuinely believe some of them did it for the best of reasons. Second thing I would say is that the Democrats have already learned a lot about messaging. So every cycle since 2016, 18, 20, and 22, the Democrats have gotten better at messaging. Democrats do a lot more with testimonials, personal self-testimonials. They do a lot more with billboards than they used to. They do more with radio than they used to. And Democrats now are building more owned media platforms like Tara McGowan at Good Information, et cetera. So Democrats have already learned a lot of lessons and fixed a lot of things. Finally, part three of the answer is, what are some major things that they still get wrong? And because this podcast is limited to a certain amount of time, I can't give you all the answers. I'll give you a top few. We're getting crushed in vertical video. TikTok, Instagram Reels. Vertical video is just a great place for the edgy, pro-Trump, fuck everything content. It's not a great place for the, hey, rule of law is really important and I passed an infrastructure reduction bill. Like TikTok doesn't lend itself to that. So we've got to figure out a way to break through on that. I believe, by the way, that one of the things that Bidekoffer gets right is that the only way to do that is to go negative. And so we have got to start making sure that people who consume vertical video are aware of what is coming from the other side. This is not Trump versus Biden. This is about state legislatures taken over by the worst human instincts and doing things as a result, like forcing that mom to leave Texas to retain her health capabilities because the Supreme Court would not sign off on the doctor's waiver. So she had to leave if she wanted to have kids again, had to leave the state. Or that 13-year-old girl in Mississippi who was forced to bear her rapist pregnancy. Like, that is happening right now, and that does not appear on vertical video, and that is a thing Democrats need to fix. Another thing that Democrats need to fix with kind of persuasive, I actually think Future Forward USA, for reasons I can get into, has already solved many of the problems that bedeviled Democratic super PACs in the past. But I also think that Democrats need to make sure that their turnout messaging is fundamentally not about presidential politics. It needs to be about group identity and standing together. It needs to be much more optimistic in that sense.
The Biden administration cannot have it both ways. They cannot acknowledge that seeking asylum is a legal right. They cannot indicate that they then want to expand legal pathways and secure our border, only to expand this disastrous Trump-era relic that only benefits human smugglers.
This pushback comes as the administration applauds the success of its new policy, announcing that southern border encounters with Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans have decreased by 97% from December after it expanded Title 42 and established an alternative parole program for up to 30,000 people per month.
There's a lot there. I mean, talking about how to build political communication material that actually works on social media. There was a great article that Justin and I were sharing with each other recently about Moskovitz and how he's figured out a way to make some of the attacks more entertaining, which makes them more shareable and sort of bite-sized, sizes, and how they can sort of be shared on social media and get a little bit of attention. And, the key thing is going negative, like you said, Dmitri. And another theory that Justin and I have kind of been working on lately, that's something that we're kind of trying to develop, is the idea that Democrats are often much more comfortable going on offense on owned issues. Issues where Democrats pull well on: healthcare, abortion, in particular, the environment. There's a handful of issues where Democrats are comfortable going on the attack because they know their own issues. And it's a lot more rare that the Democrats go on the attack on the issues that the Republicans own. When it comes to stuff like crime, immigration, Democrats are often very defensive. And sometimes they're aggressively defensive, but it's still defensive. And Republicans didn't do that on some Democratic-owned issues. For example, on healthcare, that's traditionally been a Democratic-owned issue. And the Democrats had the Obamacare, the ACA, which was popular at the time that it was passed. But Republicans turned it negative by so aggressively going on the front foot and putting the Democrats on the back foot. And so what we've kind of been wondering is there a way for Democrats to start putting Republicans on the back foot on issues that they own? On something like immigration, Democrats are often defending the current policy or saying that the Republicans are too draconian, want to enforce the border in a very inhumane way. But less frequently are they out there saying, when Trump was president, illegal crossings hit a 12-year high. This is the turf that Republicans want to fight on. And instead, there's kind of a pushback and an offensive, aggressive kind of attack on their domain. And I think Justin and I agree that if something like this was really attempted, there could be a softening of some of the advantages. Maybe the issues aren't going to flip or these become Democratic-owned issues. But as long as you're chipping away at these advantages, you're kind of introducing doubt in the voters' minds about whether the GOP are really as strong on these subjects as they're currently perceived to be.
And one thing to add here, if you're not attacking the Republicans on this issue, then by leaving a vacuum, you are implicitly agreeing that President Trump is better on stopping illegal immigration when the facts still are on the Democrat side. Democrats just, to us, appear unwilling to use that message, use Fox News clips, use clips of Chip Roy and James Lankford saying how bad it was under President Trump, because there's some hesitancy there. And we wanted your take on that.
Well, I agree with you guys completely. 100%. It is the strategically right move. As to why it's hard to get Democrats to take the strategically correct move as often as people like us would like, this gets back to what it is about Democrats and who the party is. The Democrats, if you were ever reading sci-fi, the Republicans are like one of these big top-down institutions, homogenous, violent, and the Democrats are just chaotic. They do a lot of different things. So I bet if you trolled the internet looking really, really hard, you would find someone doing the messaging that you're talking about. But it's not most people, because people are all off. And the center of balance of the Democratic Party is a little bit uncomfortable with that. But I agree with you. And one of the things that I am urging all Democrats to do every time I get the chance is to go on offense on the border right now. And the stuff that you mentioned, John, is good, but I am very focused in particular on helping people understand. Remember, guys, let's just take a step back on the messaging here. This election is going to be decided in at most 7 states. I'm just saying the 7 states that were closest in 2020. So that's North Carolina is the one that I'm adding that Trump won. The others you will know. In those 7 states, and by the way, they're not all equal, right? Democrats are far more likely to reach the White House through Michigan than through North Carolina, but whatever. So in those 7 states, there are, in our judgment, 4 million human beings who are going to vote and whose vote is still could go either way. And there's another 4 million human beings who are Democratic voters who are going to stay home on current trends. So those are the 2 communities I'm looking at. 8 million human beings, 8 million swing voters, 8 million Democratic turnout targets. And for these people, the trick is telling them new information about Donald Trump is very hard. They know about Donald Trump. And it's not that they know everything. It's that they're not available for a conversation about how bad Donald Trump is. The ears are not open. So the question is, how do you get them to get to something surprising? And the answer, I think, is something that historian Tim Snyder, who studies autocracy, has said, is the appeal of a strong man is that they bring order. That's what they want. And the counter messaging is that they are not your strong man. They are their own strong man. And they will bring order to their lives, potentially at your expense. That has got to be the macro messaging. And the border is an excellent, excellent example of him shutting down the Langford bill. So it's the Murphy Cinema Langford bill, but I'd call it the Langford bill. And I would play the clip of Langford in the State of the Union, and I would go hardline, saying, this is the bill that seals our border. Pass it. I wouldn't blame Trump. I'd say, pass it. Pass the bill. And have every Democrat saying, pass this bill. Protect our border. Now, again, I can't control the Democratic Party. They're chaotic. Like that old line, I'm not a member of an organized political party. I'm a Democrat, right? Like, I can't make them do it, but that's what they should be doing.
Would a message of a Democratic branded ad, even if it's future forward and i.e., everybody will know it's, your typical branding, pointing to a complex policy solution that President Biden was not able to get through Congress when he was in office, will that will that be received positively by these swing voters who are inherently distrustful of Congress, legislation, politicians promising to fix things when
So this is so Justin, this is a great question, but just to be clear, it's a 2-step, right? So
okay.
The 8 million voters that I care about are not paying attention now.
Correct. Low information.
Low information in politics, right? So they're not, they don't, they're just at a distance. Like if you are a swing voter and you have not yet decided which way you're voting, you are someone who has decided that you are going to decide at the last minute, okay? And so the purpose of going on offense on the Langford bill and organizing a grassroots lobbying effort around the Langford bill is there are many, many human beings in this country who are really fucking pissed about the border. Legitimately pissed. And a lot of them are independents and a lot of them are Democrats. And a bill was just crafted that is, put aside the complicated, it was a complete solution that the most conservative Republicans endorsed. And not only did they endorse it, they said there's no way they would be able to get anything as good on their own terms. And Trump said out loud, kill it and tell them I told you to kill it. And so the question is, the 2-step process is if you run a grassroots lobbying campaign that gets people to demand the passage of the Langford bill, it's easy to do. You're not reaching any swing voters. You're not asking swing voters. No swing voter is going to do grassroots lobbying for the Langford bill. You're reaching the activists. And if, a few thousand activists who are really hot to trot on the border pick up the phone and call their people to demand the passage of the Langford bill, then come crunch time, September and October, when the Democrats are saying, their guy is just as bad as the border, the ads then will be ads that play into something people already know and believe, which is that Trump is in it for himself. And that's why you can't trust him on the border. And it's not that they'll say, Biden's the guy. It's that, to your point, is Trump really that much better? And then you can throw in shit about like, God, look what happened under his watch.
And I think that I'm so passionate about our theories. I think that that's why our theory would fit in so well, because if you don't attack Trump for being inherently chaotic, weak, and a mess on the border and not your strongman, then it's going to be an uphill battle to say President Trump is to blame for killing this bill when, according to polls, 70% of these swing voters view Trump as better on the immigration issue. So basically, you have somebody who's viewed as worse on the immigration issue saying Trump's to blame for killing this bill, and then Trump saying this bill actually wasn't the solution. Who are you going to trust in the 70s?
Wait, but what is your alternative, Justin? Because like the thing is like the version that John said, which is like there's a thing that happened in this book, Rural White Rage, which has become very controversial lately, where they talk about the debate between the Democrat and the Oklahoma incumbent Kevin Stitt. As I understand it, there was never any real likelihood that the Democrat had a shot, but it was closer than it might have been because Stitt is super hardcore, no exceptions. The 12-year-old girl has to give birth to the rapist kid. And so you're like, okay. So a thing that she said direct to camera was straight out of the Justin and John recommendation book, which is she looked the Oklahomans in the eyes and said, our crime rate per capita is higher than New York under this governor. They delivered stone cold facts. And Stitt turned to the audience with a big, broad smile and a southern drawl and said, I think I must have misheard, but it sounds like she thinks crime's higher here. And he laughed and the audience laughed. Truth doesn't matter, man. What matters is do the people who are hardcore immigration activists understand the kind of shit that Langford offers? Yes. Are there a lot of them? Yes. Can you activate them? Yes. Can you activate them between now and September? Yes. What happens if you activate them between now and September? Well, their buddies who are used to hearing them rant and rave will validate that Langford was a good thing.
Stone cold facts. That's not the hook. That's not the thesis, right? So I think what John was trying to get through is using the facts because they're in our favor. But quite frankly, the message has to be evoking hatred and fear and negativity from your viewer.
Those ads are really important, but literally you can't run them until October at the earliest. Really not the last. Like that's an ad that you run late. There are things you can do now, right? So like one of the things that you guys did on the Republican side that the Democrats watched very closely was in 2010, you used Nancy Pelosi to take back the majority. And the Democrats did a bunch of polling and said, Pelosi, she's not that unpopular. This is fine. And over the subsequent few months, about $40 million was used to convert Pelosi into something that was not fine. Because people were not interested in talking about Barack Obama and so forth, but they were interested in this new figure, Pelosi. So the thing is what is the new information that you can lock into key parts of the electorate? So who's open to listening to what? Right now, from now through October, nobody who is available to be a potential Biden voter is going to be watching an ad about crime in that way. However, people who are deep in the weeds, like one of the reasons why the Gaza activist thing is so dangerous is it's the inverse. It's a bunch of young people standing up and saying out loud, it is super cool to say you're not going to get out and vote for Biden. Like if that continues to be the case later, that's a real problem, right? What I'm saying is we've got to use this moment to create the conditions in the reverse. Part of that is making sure that conservative women who have described themselves as pro-life, but really mean what Democrats are now, they need to start, like the thing about the hatred now, the immigration activists, they are ready to hate the bureaucracy for shutting down the Langford bill. They do not know yet that it's their champion, Trump, who did it. But because these are immigration activists, right? Like, remember, like, think of them, like, do you remember that crazy, angry Fox News blonde woman, Ann Coulter? So Ann Coulter, yeah, I know, right? I'm not limiting it early. So Ann Coulter, right? So Ann Coulter, said basically Trump could actually perform an abortion in the Oval Office and I wouldn't care as long as he closes our borders, right? There are people like that. And the people like that who are not following every twist and turn need to be fired up about the Langford bill. And the only people who are going to fire them up about the Langford bill and get the grassroots lobbying engine and get the anger and get the grassroots money are people who are willing to say, like, yeah, we got to seal the border. And Republicans are the ones doing that. And they're not willing to do the lobbying for this because their God King has said no.
My problem is a lot of the country views Democrats as unwilling to crack down on illegal immigration because of how the party messages the issue. President Biden, based on our understanding, is naturally more conservative. He did kowtow to progressive activists early on. It wasn't kowtowing enough, and then later it became he was giving in too much. So there has been inherent tension, but it's very difficult for the Democrats, for example, who are viewed as not caring about illegal immigration, or more nefariously, right, if you believe in Elon Musk and all that stuff. But for our swing voters, to have Democrats who are viewed not caring to come out and be the source of authority about why Trump is wrong, who is viewed by 70% of these voters as being stronger on the argument, when throughout this whole time, all that we're making is a legislative argument, parliamentarian argument about this piece of Langford legislation. And then we do the scare tactics in October, end of September. From my perspective, and maybe this isn't an outside group's responsibility, but unless there is some emphasis within the leadership of the Democratic Party where they are at least willing to use in their vocabulary consistently that illegal immigration is wrong and something that needs to be addressed, it's impossible to then have the equity built up in the electorate, in news outlets, to then be able to move into the parliamentarian argument and then the fear argument that would come next. Like there seems to be a lot of work that isn't happening. Maybe that means that President Biden needs to do an executive order on the bill, but there needs to be a shift.
An executive order is a really bad thing, but like the broader thing is very much right. There is a tension on rhetoric that matters a lot, right? So Republicans won a lot of seats in 2020 because Democrats did not say the words fund the police loudly enough, slowly enough, often enough. Joe Biden did. He actually said fund the police in his State of the Union. He said it a few times. Said it faster than I wanted. I would have wanted slower. I would have wanted more frequently. But at least he said it. And there was a huge backlash on the left. So Biden and people around Biden who agree with your view and mine on this sort of an issue are, waging a constant fight to keep their coalition together. Now, I believe that the candidates from deep blue jurisdictions, if you are in a D+20 jurisdiction and you have an opinion about what to do about the border, my advice is that you shut the fuck up for a few months.
Since we're talking about the timings of these messages, the timeline of the message, I actually think that this is one of the most interesting aspects of this whole issue, the issue with the border and the Langford bill. And that's because there's a huge gap between what the Republicans have been saying and what they're willing to do as it pertains to the timing. So what Republicans have been saying for a long time now, for several months about all of this, is that it's an emergency and a crisis. That there are crossings happening every single day, thousands of crossings every single day. It's an emergency. But then when the legislation comes up, a chance to address it, even if it isn't all of what they wanted, but maybe some of what they wanted, as they might characterize it, their response is, well, we should wait. Let's wait till we have the White House back and then we'll address it. And we all know how legislation works. You don't pass a bill like this in the first month you're in office. So what we're really talking about is, let's wait 18 months to do something about this. Let's wait a year and a half. And if it's really an emergency, if it's really a crisis, if there's really that many thousands of people coming every single day, how many thousands of people will be arriving in those 18 months? And this, I think, is where you can demonstrate that they're acting in bad faith. And yes, maybe it's too early to tell all of the voters this.
Oh, no. I agree with you completely. So look, the messaging here, in my view, is if Trump is correct that the current border situation is as he says it is, then his decision to kill the Langford bill means that he is personally responsible for this many rapes, this many murders. Just say it in those terms. My point to you guys earlier is that this is a conversation with the country. And a conversation with the country is complicated and occurs in stages. You don't propose marriage on the first date. Right now, the conversation is with the people who are super active on immigration and super worked up about the border. Make sure that they lock in the fact that fucking everything they wanted was right in front of them and was ripped away. Make sure they know it. And the only way to make sure they know it is to get them to do grassroots lobbying for it. That's it.
I mean, I think this is a great point. I love this, and I think it really kind of aligns with what we were talking about with the issue prioritization and issue ownership aspect of all of this, right? Because what we're talking about is there are a lot of people in the country who prioritize this issue of immigration, and they've generally trusted the Republicans on the issue. And if the cohort of kind of thought leaders in that group are suddenly pointing in a different direction, all of these voters are downstream of those thought leaders. And we can see,
and they're not suddenly pointing in a different direction, right? Because they're still anti-Democrat, right? They're still lobbying for Langford's bill for now. It's only later that they realize, wait a minute.
We've seen on so many different issues how prioritizing something builds trust. And political party coalitions are entirely based on trust. And if you get people to agree with you on your number one issue, then they start becoming much more accepting of your arguments on all of these other topics. One of the best examples of this is abortion. And, we know that today it's a good issue for the Democrats, but historically it's helped Republicans in part because it's helped them solidify their support among a lot of religious voters for whom it's priority, who would otherwise have a different opinion about gun control, have a different opinion about the death penalty, have a different opinion about immigration. But because they trust the Republicans on their number one issue, they're much more willing to accept their arguments and all this other stuff. So immigration is an issue like this. And if you got all of these voters who prioritize it, questioning whether the Republicans are really serious, are really honest, are really acting in good faith on the thing that matters them the most, you're really starting to chip away at an advantage in a big way.
1,000,000%. And this is the thing, just because a group is not a swing voter group doesn't mean you don't talk to them. It means you just talk to them now. By September, don't talk to them anymore. They're not useful to you. But now they are, because they're the intermediate place. I used to work in your intro, you mentioned that I hadn't been heavily involved in politics. That's true. And I certainly was not a partisan, but I was involved in education reform. And so for a couple of years, I built an organization with Michelle Reed called Students First that lobbied on behalf of ed reform. And we would have these amazing levels of consensus among reform-minded teachers and parents about what needed to be done. But come election time, they would all ask their union friends, and they would close ranks, and the polls meant nothing. They would decide at the end. So there's an opportunity for every community that really cares to make sure that they understand, right? If you really, really care about big pharma and anti-vax, you've got a candidate in RFK who will deliver everything you want. If you really care about the border, get pissed about the Langford bill, right? So just keep going.
I love this because this is the first time I've heard of this theory, and I didn't tell you this before we were recording, but I handled immigration policy for one of the most draconian Tea Party members. So I was not only meeting with these groups, we were organizing, discussions with Paul Gosar's chief of staff to give us bad speech to a bunch of, grassroots voters in Kansas. And this does sound like a novel approach, which is hard to achieve in politics because people are stuck in their ways. But I want to move the conversation away, Dmitri, from something that John and I are intimately familiar with to something that you've spoken about that I'm more ignorant of, which is in the interview with The Intercept, you spoke about how Trump, despite being a character from a historical and global perspective, represents an aberration from the previous era of U.S. presidential politics, that he's not merely a symptom, but a major cause of dysfunction in a way that's different from what came before. And this is what I really want to dig in and get your thoughts on, Dmitri. There are people who will vote in this election cycle that were 9 years old when Trump began his presidential campaigns. So what are the implications of a new electorate for whom Trump is the most familiar figure? And polling maybe shows that there might be a change in how young people are approaching politics.
Yeah, so a great deal is embedded in there. In terms of how unusual Trump is historically, this is one of those cases where a lot of individual things add up to make a difference in kind, right? America has had presidents who've engaged in criminal behavior. We've never had someone who was so criminal before, during, and after the presidency, so openly criminal. America has had celebrity presidents. America has had racist presidents. I mean, Woodrow Wilson, extremely racist Democrat. American has had presidents who were disdainful and disruptive of the rule of law. Andrew Jackson, obviously. This is the first time we've had it all. This guy was built, he looks and feels and smells like characters out of American fiction. You know, Neil Postman wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. You know, Buzz Windrip was a fictional character invented that looks like Donald Trump. Tim Robbins played a character like Trump in a movie, kind of a pseudo faux documentary about this movement. Like this kind of a person comes along, and Trump is supremely talented, he was crafted, right? The Apprentice built him into a brand. The Russians built him into a figure. And he grew up in the American culture, that the same American culture that led, for example, to Huey Long in the 1930s, or D.C. Stevenson, the Klansman in the 1930s, or, this is a part of who we are, but it's the most extreme version. We've never handed this much power to someone this bad, ever. We'd never done it before 2016. And if we do it in 2024, it will be a lot more power. The presidency that we will be handing to him is a lot more powerful. So that's what I mean when I say he's disruptive. I don't believe that if we as a democratic people hand that much power to a criminal with that many criminal ties, I don't think we get it back. Now, as to how you communicate that to voters, again, this gets back to this. You can't talk to them. They're not, like the person who's 9, like, let's imagine that, you're Gen Z and you're just turning 17 and you're in North Carolina. If you are the kind of progressive voter who's willing to vote Democrat, but you're a contingent voter, you're not sure whether you're going to vote or not, you are for sure not interested in having a conversation about Donald Trump at all. So you got to remind them, hey guys, this is, if you're in North Carolina, 2/3 supermajority with that guy, Mark Robinson, hope you don't mind if your daughter has to give birth after she's raped in gym. And have that come out. The gun violence, the abortion rights, the craziness, the Project 2025 stuff is very out in the open. So, like, not only are they going to take your rights away, they're going to prevent you from getting them back. That's how you got to reach them. You can't talk about any of the Trump stuff.
So, I mean, that it makes intuitive sense, right? The older voters who have more historical context, Trump matters more to them as sort of a figure. And the younger voters for whom Trump is sort of the status quo, and as disturbing a sense as that is to us who are a little bit older, for them, you talk about the other issues.
Yeah. And for anybody, like, the important thing for any swing voter, because like 90% of the election in 2024 is going to be the same as 2020. The ball game is the remaining 10%. And for the remaining 10%, what new information has emerged since 2020 that might be of interest, right? One piece of important new information is the Dobbs decision. Another piece of new information is that Donald Trump refused to leave power and incited a violent insurrection. Also, he's been indicted on 91 counts. Also, he was found unanimously by a jury to have shoved himself into a woman against her will, which the judge confirmed is rape. Unanimous jury found that he had committed rape. A unanimous court in Colorado found that he engaged in insurrection. There was a dispute over whether to take him off the ballot over it, but no court, lots of courts around the country have found that he engaged in insurrection. And they find that judicially based on the evidence out of the January 6th congressional hearings. There's a ton of evidence of criminality, a ton of evidence of religious extremism. The things that he is saying out loud, people don't know how much Trump has declined mentally, how much losing broke him. So there's a lot of new information. And again, you got to get it out to people where they are.
Trump has declined far more from a mental standpoint than any, I think, active politician that's out there in the House or Senate or anywhere. And that's a very persuasive argument. The last question I have for you, Dmitri, maybe we need to do a part 2 a couple months from now or whenever, but you mentioned basically negative partisanship, which we love here. I know that's not, you might not hear that from everybody, but is there a line where you go too extreme and you scare the shit out of vulnerable people? And I'm asking this playing devil's advocate, but a lot of the stuff in Trump 2025, a lot of the stuff that Stephen Miller has openly advocated for, you could make an argument that they look like internment camps. And you could make an argument that if you're a brown Puerto Rican person in Florida, like the people I was an appointed official in to represent, that maybe Trump would round you all up in Florida and deport you back to the island. And that is grounded in fact. So the question is, Democrats, morals, what's the line? Is there any when you are truthfully trying to make people aware of the danger between the two different choices in this election?
Yeah, there for sure is a line. One line is, do you promote mass group hatred? Are you saying that a whole group of people, by virtue of who they are subhuman? Yes or no? Because if you are, then you crossed a line. That's actually the most important one. Another line is scale disinformation. Like, if you are going to attack, like, the epistemology of truth, like, then you're like, what are you fighting for, right? So those are the lines. Now, you'd asked a broader question about efficacy and ethics and so forth. And what I would say is like, when the other side is this fucking crazy, you're better off understating it. Understate it through testimonials. This is a thing that I've observed as a human being who's a lot like you, swing voter, and here's what I've observed.
Yeah, there really have been so many instances where political actors have tried to reach for something just a little bit further than what's solid. And it's like, the truth is bad enough. Just stick with what is 100% solid. And then you're not going to get caught in this little nitpicky stuff.